1. The Third German Antarctic Expedition, 1938–1939. Everyone thinks the Nazis lost the war in 1945. But what if I told you that's exactly what they wanted you to believe? December 1938. A German ship leaves Hamburg in complete secrecy. Destination: Antarctica. What they found there would haunt intelligence agencies for the next 80 years. The ship was called MS Schwabenland. The mission was led by Captain Alfred Richer, a polar expert who'd already survived the Arctic. But this expedition was different. The orders came from the highest levels of the Nazi regime, and the crew had no idea what they were really looking for. Or did they? On January 19, 1939, they arrived at Antarctica's Princess Martha coast. What happened next is where history and conspiracy violently collide. The official story is simple. They were mapping territory for whaling operations. 2 seaplanes flew 15 missions, captured 11,000 photographs, and dropped aluminum swastika markers across 600,000 square kilometers of ice. They named it Neuschwabenland, New Swabia, German territory. 3 weeks later, they left. But here's what doesn't make sense. Decades later, researchers started finding something in those documents. References to suitable locations, mentions of thermal anomalies, gaps in the photographic record that no one could explain. And then the stories started spreading about Base 211, a massive underground fortress built beneath the Antarctic ice, powered by geothermal energy, designed to preserve the Nazi regime if they lost the war. Here's the problem with that story. Actually, there are multiple problems, and each one destroys the conspiracy completely. First, the timeline. The expedition lasted exactly 3 weeks. Not 3 months, not 3 years, 21 days. The crew consisted of 82 men focused on aerial photography. Building a massive underground military base would require thousands of workers, heavy construction equipment that weighs hundreds of tons, enormous supplies of concrete and steel, and years of continuous construction work in the most hostile environment on Earth. The Schwabenland brought none of these things. Think about it from a practical standpoint. Germany in 1939 was preparing for war in Europe. They were building tanks, planes, and U-boats. Resources were stretched to breaking point. And you're telling me they diverted thousands of workers and millions of Reichsmarks to build a secret base in Antarctica that they never once supplied, never once visited again, and never once used? But wait, there's something even more damning. Not a single expedition member ever returned to Antarctica. Germany never sent another mission, never launched a single supply run, never established any permanent presence whatsoever. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, they formally abandoned all territorial claims to New Schwabenland. If Base 211 existed, the Nazis apparently forgot to tell anyone it was there, forgot to supply it, and forgot to ever use it. The Base 211 myth? It came from a single book published in 1947 by a Hungarian writer named Ladislas Szabó. The book was called Hitler is Alive, and it made wild claims without providing a shred of evidence. No documents, no witnesses, no proof. Just sensational stories designed to sell copies. Today, the area once claimed as New Schwabenland is part of Norway's Queen Maud Land. It hosts multiple international research stations. It's been thoroughly surveyed with ground-penetrating radar, extensively photographed by modern satellites, and explored by researchers from dozens of countries. No one has ever found Base 211, because it never existed. But if the Germans didn't build secret Antarctic bases during that expedition, why did the British launch a military operation to Antarctica in the middle of World War II? That's mystery number 2. 2. Operation Tabarin, 1943 to 1946. The world is burning. D-Day hasn't happened yet. The Battle of Stalingrad just ended, and Britain decides to send a secret military expedition to Antarctica. Why? The operation was called Tabarin, allegedly named after a Parisian nightclub known for late-night chaos. 14 men, 3 ships, a mission so secret that even decades later, parts of the files remain classified. And here's what makes it suspicious. It took only 10 months from cabinet approval to departure. For a remote Antarctic expedition during total war, that's impossibly fast. The official explanation? They needed to monitor German shipping in the South Atlantic and assert British territorial claims. But conspiracy theorists noticed something else in those declassified files. References to reconnaissance of enemy installations, mentions of securing strategic locations, and most disturbing, vague reports of encounters with unknown personnel in subsurface locations. The rumor spread. Operation Tabarin's real mission was to find and destroy the Nazi Antarctic bases. Some versions even claimed British Special Air Service commandos were involved, conducting raids while scientists provided cover. There's even a story about polar men living in tunnels beneath the ice. But here's where it gets interesting. The truth is somehow both more boring and more fascinating than the conspiracy. Operation Tabarin had 3 objectives, all documented in official British records. First, deny safe harbors to German U-boats that might threaten Allied shipping routes around Cape Horn. This was practical wartime strategy. Second, gather meteorological data from the Southern Ocean, which was valuable for Allied naval operations. And third, most importantly, reassert British territorial claims. Why? Because Argentina and Chile weren't waiting for the war to end. They were actively placing flags, establishing posts, and claiming British territory, while Britain was distracted fighting Germany. Operation Tabarin's participants kept detailed logs, personal diaries, official reports describing every day of the expedition. They mentioned scientific research, territorial marking, harsh weather, and the constant struggle to survive in brutal conditions. Know what they don't mention? Special forces, German bases, tunnel systems, polar men, any of it. The only encounter with potential enemies happened in February 1945, when a British ship visited Argentinian meteorologists at Scotia Bay. The Argentinians were surprised, but friendly. They shared coffee and weather data. When an Argentinian relief ship arrived, both vessels departed peacefully. No combat, no confrontation, just awkward geopolitical theater on ice. The polar men in tunnels story? It appears nowhere in any historical document from the period. It seems to have been invented entirely by conspiracy writers decades later, probably inspired by science fiction stories popular at the time. Operation Tabarin's real legacy is that it established Britain's continuous presence in Antarctica. It evolved into the Falkland Islands Dependencies Survey, which later became the British Antarctic Survey, one of the world's leading polar research organizations. The 3 bases played crucial roles in Antarctic science for decades. Port Lockroy is now preserved as a museum. That's the truth. Not as exciting as secret commando raids, but actually more impressive when you think about what these 14 people accomplished in one of Earth's harshest environments. But if there were no secret bases for the British to find, why did 2 German submarines mysteriously appear in Argentina months after the war ended? That's where things get really strange. 3. The missing U-boats, 1945. July 10th, 1945. The war has been over for 2 months. Every German submarine has either been sunk, captured, or surrendered, except this one. U-530 surfaces off the coast of Argentina and surrenders to shocked Argentine authorities. The submarine's 24-year-old commander offers confusing explanations. The ship's log is missing. The deck gun has been thrown overboard, and the journey from Europe has taken an inexplicably long time. Within days, newspapers across South America are running wild stories. The submarine transported Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun to Antarctica. It delivered Nazi gold to secret bases. It was part of a convoy that established a Fourth Reich beneath the ice. Then on August 17th, it happens again. Another German submarine, U-977, also surfaces in Argentina, also missing documentation, also with strange gaps in its story. Now intelligence agencies are panicking. What's really going on? Imagine you're a naval intelligence officer in 1945. You've just spent 6 years hunting these submarines. You thought it was over. And now 2 of them appear out of nowhere, thousands of miles from where they should be, with missing records and suspicious behavior. What would you think? The conspiracy writes itself. 2 submarines, missing logs, delayed surrender, mysterious cargo. It's obvious, right? They went to Antarctica. Except intelligence agencies didn't just wonder about this. They interrogated everyone. For months. And what they found was both more mundane and more human than any conspiracy. U-530 had been operating off the coast of New York when Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. The commander, Otto Vermuth, was young and terrified. He'd been told by Nazi propaganda that the Allies would execute submarine crews as war criminals. When the surrender announcement came over the radio, he convinced himself it might be an Allied trick. So he ran. He jettisoned the torpedoes to avoid war crimes charges, threw the classified documents overboard to prevent intelligence leaks, removed the deck gun to appear less threatening, then began a slow, cautious journey south to Argentina, which he mistakenly believed would be sympathetic to Germans. He didn't know Argentina had declared war on Germany in March 1945. The interrogation records revealed something else, something that completely destroys the Antarctica theory. U-530 and U-977 were Type IXC and Type 6IC submarines. Here's what that means. Their maximum range was about 13,450 nautical miles at cruising speed. Reaching Antarctica from Argentina would require traveling approximately 3,000 kilometers through some of the world's roughest seas. And here's the killer detail. In May, June, and July of 1945, pack ice extends 500 to 1,665 kilometers from the Antarctic coast. These diesel submarines needed to surface regularly to run their engines and recharge batteries. They could only stay submerged for 48 to 72 hours maximum. To reach any supposed Antarctic base, they would have needed to travel over 1,000 kilometers under solid ice without surfacing. Physically impossible. The snorkel devices they used to run engines while shallow submerged would be useless under thick pack ice. U-977's interrogation was even more detailed because Commander Heinz Schaefer had kept intact navigational logs. The logs showed the complete route from Norway to Argentina. No detours to Antarctica. No secret cargo. No passengers beyond regular crew. Both submarines were eventually transferred to U.S. custody, thoroughly searched, and both were sunk as target practice in 1946 and 1947. No treasure was found. No evidence of Antarctic missions. No mystery cargo. Just 2 young, frightened commanders making terrible decisions in the chaos of a collapsing regime. But if the submarines didn't go to Antarctica, why did the United States send the largest military force in history to the continent just 1 year later? That's mystery number 4, and it's the one conspiracy theorists quote the most. 4. Operation Highjump, 1946 to 1947. Late 1946. The United States assembles an invasion force. 4,700 men, 13 ships, an aircraft carrier, a submarine, icebreakers, 33 aircraft. Destination, Antarctica. This should not make sense. The war's been over for a year. The United States is demobilizing. Soldiers are going home. The defense budget is being slashed. And they're sending more military assets to Antarctica than most countries used for actual combat operations during the war. The official explanation? Training exercises and scientific research. Nobody believed that then. Nobody believes it now. Within months, the rumors started spreading. Operation Highjump wasn't a scientific expedition. It was a military assault on the Nazi Antarctic bases. The expedition encountered fierce resistance from advanced flying saucers. They suffered heavy casualties in aerial combat. They were forced to retreat after 8 weeks of what was supposed to be a 6 to 8 month mission, and the evidence seems damning. The legendary polar explorer, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, supposedly gave an interview warning about flying objects that could travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. There's just one problem with this story. Actually, there are several problems. And once you see them, the entire conspiracy collapses. Operation Highjump was officially designated the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program. The timing wasn't suspicious. It was strategic. The Cold War was beginning. Tensions with the Soviet Union were escalating, and suddenly polar regions mattered in a way they never had before. Think about it. If war broke out with the Soviets, it wouldn't be fought in tropical jungles or European cities. It would be fought in the Arctic. The shortest routes for bombers and missiles between the United States and USSR go over the North Pole. The Navy needed to learn how to operate ships in ice. The Air Force needed to test equipment in extreme cold. Personnel needed training in polar conditions. Antarctica was a perfect testing ground because it was even more extreme than the Arctic. And the expedition succeeded beyond expectations. They established Little America 4 base on the Ross Ice Shelf. They conducted extensive aerial photography, mapping vast, unexplored regions. They took approximately 70,000 photographs. They tested cold weather equipment. They trained thousands of personnel. They gathered meteorological and oceanographic data that proved invaluable. As for the early termination after a battle, here's the reality. The operation was always planned to conclude before the Antarctic winter arrived in late February. They left on schedule when weather conditions deteriorated and continuing operations became suicidal. The mission did suffer casualties. 3 men died when their PBM Mariner crashed during a blizzard on December 30th, 1946. One deckman, Vance Woodall, was killed in a ship unloading accident on January 21st, 1947. 4 deaths, all from accidents. No combat casualties, no battles with aircraft, no encounters with Nazi forces. But what about Admiral Byrd's quote about flying objects? This is where it gets interesting. On March 5th, 1947, a Chilean newspaper, El Mercurio, published an interview with Byrd. In the interview, he discussed the strategic importance of polar regions in the emerging Cold War. He warned that in a future war, the United States could be attacked by hostile aircraft flying over the poles. That's it. That's the actual quote. Conspiracy theorists took the Spanish text, deliberately mistranslated key phrases, added references that don't exist in the original article, and created the flying objects that can fly from pole to pole quote. Anyone who reads the original Spanish interview can verify this. Byrd was discussing conventional Soviet aircraft and Cold War strategy, not UFOs or Nazi flying saucers. The most ironic part? Operation Highjump was so unsecret that military photographers created a documentary film about it called The Secret Land. It was shown in theaters across America. It won an Academy Award. The film shows exactly what the expedition did. Scientific research, mapping, cold weather training. No secret battles. No flying saucers. No Nazi bases. Just the U.S. Navy preparing for potential Arctic operations by training in Antarctica. But conspiracy theorists weren't done. They claimed the very next expedition, Operation Windmill, was sent to assess the damage from Highjump's defeat. Let's look at what really happened. 5. Operation Windmill, 1947 to 1948. Operation Highjump ends in early 1947. Immediately, the Navy begins planning another Antarctic expedition. Operation Windmill launches in late 1947. The timing seems suspicious, unless you understand what these expeditions actually did. Conspiracy theorists claim Windmill was a reconnaissance mission. Assess the damage from last year's battle. Find safer entry points for future attacks. Locate hidden base entrances. Prepare for the nuclear assault that would come later. Here's the problem. Operation Windmill's mission was so specific and technical that the conspiracy doesn't even make sense. During Operation Highjump, aircraft took approximately 70,000 aerial photographs. Sounds impressive, right? Except those photographs had a critical limitation. They lacked ground control point. Imagine you take a photo of a landscape from an airplane. The photo shows mountains, valleys, and coastlines. But without knowing the exact location where the photo was taken, the exact altitude, and precise reference points on the ground, you can't turn that photo into an accurate map. You can't measure distances. You can't determine elevations. You can't create navigation charts. That's the problem Highjump created. 70,000 beautiful photographs that couldn't be properly used without ground truthing. Operation Windmill's entire mission was to establish ground control points. Land at key locations photographed during Highjump. Take precise astronomical and geodetic measurements. Correlate them with the aerial images. This painstaking work would allow cartographers to create accurate Antarctic maps. It's not exciting. It's not dramatic. It's surveying work. But it was essential for every subsequent Antarctic expedition for the next several decades. The timing, which seems suspicious to conspiracy theorists, was actually standard surveying methodology. You always plan this as a two-phase operation. Phase 1 conducts aerial photography. Phase 2 provides ground control. This is how every major mapping project worked before satellite navigation systems existed. The data gathered by Operation Windmill proved invaluable. The ground control points enabled the creation of the first comprehensive maps of large Antarctic regions. These maps were used by all subsequent expeditions, including those from other nations. Operation Windmill was a technical success that advanced Antarctic cartography significantly, exactly as planned. Nothing more, nothing less. But if the US wasn't fighting Nazi bases in Antarctica, why did they detonate nuclear weapons near the continent in 1958? That's where the conspiracy gets nuclear. 6. Operation Argus, 1958. August 1958. In complete secrecy, the United States Navy detonates 3 nuclear warheads over the South Atlantic Ocean. High-altitude nuclear explosions, near Antarctica, in secret. The public wouldn't learn about it until 1959. Conspiracy theorists saw the obvious explanation. Conventional weapons failed to destroy the Nazi Antarctic bases, so the United States escalated. Nuclear weapons, electromagnetic pulse effects to disable the base's electrical systems, or collapse the underground tunnels, or destroy mysterious portals the Nazis were using. The operation involved 4,500 personnel on 9 ships. The USS Norton Sound, specially modified to launch nuclear-tipped missiles. 3 detonations at different altitudes, 200 kilometers, 540 kilometers, and 750 kilometers above Earth. Why would you need 3 different altitudes unless you were testing effects on underground installations? There's just one detail that destroys this entire theory, and it's embarrassingly simple. The detonations occurred approximately 1,800 kilometers southwest of Cape Town, South Africa, in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, more than 2,000 kilometers north of Antarctica. They were nowhere near the Antarctic continent. The explosions occurred in the upper atmosphere, the thermosphere and exosphere, regions 200 to 750 kilometers above Earth's surface. Even if you believe the Nazis had underground bases in Antarctica, you'd have to explain how nuclear explosions 2,000 kilometers away and hundreds of kilometers up would affect them. Operation Argus had a completely different purpose, and it's actually fascinating. A Greek physicist named Nicholas Christopoulos published a theory suggesting that high-altitude nuclear detonations could create artificial radiation belts around Earth, similar to the Van Allen belts that naturally exist. These artificial belts, Christopoulos argued, could theoretically disable incoming Soviet nuclear missiles by disrupting their electronics, or blind Soviet radar systems. This was the height of the Cold War. The United States and USSR were locked in nuclear competition. Both sides were exploring every possible advantage, and a nuclear test ban treaty was being negotiated. The U.S. had maybe 5 months to test this theory before testing might be banned forever. The tests worked exactly as Christopoulos predicted. High-energy electrons became trapped in Earth's magnetic field, creating artificial radiation belts. Argus 1 and 2's radiation shells lasted about 3 weeks each. Argus 3 lasted about a month. But then the artificial belts dispersed. Natural geomagnetic storms degraded them. The concept worked in theory, but wasn't practical for actual missile defense. Operation Argus proved the physics was correct, but the military application was useless. It did provide valuable data on atmospheric physics, radiation effects, and long-distance communications. That data came from Explorer 4 satellite observations, ship logs, and scientific reports that thoroughly document what occurred. No radiation fallout was detected in Antarctica. Because the detonations were too far away, too high in the atmosphere, and pointing in the wrong direction. The conspiracy connecting Argus to Antarctic bases requires complete ignorance of basic geography. But if there were no Nazi bases, what about the mysterious Vril technology supposedly discovered under the ice? That conspiracy goes deeper than any nuclear test. 7. The 1938 Vril technology discovery. Some conspiracies claim the Nazis didn't build their Antarctic base from scratch. They found something already there, ancient, non-human, powerful, technology from a lost civilization, called Vril. According to these theories, the 1938 Neuschwabenland expedition discovered ruins beneath the ice, advanced machinery, energy systems beyond human understanding. This discovery supposedly fueled the Nazi flying saucer program, which was then moved to Antarctica to continue development away from Allied bombers. The story has details that make it seem credible. References to the Thule Society, a real occult group in 1920s Germany. Mentions of the Vril Society, supposedly even more secret. Claims that Nazi scientists were obsessed with ancient civilizations and lost technology. There's just one problem. Well, several problems. But the first one is embarrassing. Vril comes from a science fiction novel, published in 1871, by a British author named Edward Bulwer Lytton. The book is called The Coming Race, and it's about a superior underground civilization possessing an energy force called Vril. It's fiction, Victorian science fiction, not ancient knowledge, not lost civilization secrets, a novel. Yes, some fringe occult groups in early 20th century Germany incorporated ideas from this fictional novel into their mystical beliefs. The Thule Society was real. They did have weird occult beliefs, but there is zero connection between these fringe groups and actual Nazi Antarctic expeditions. The 1938-39 Neuschwabenland expedition lasted 3 weeks. It conducted aerial photography from seaplanes. The crew never went into the interior regions they photographed, not once. The expedition's complete records have been extensively studied. Private papers of expedition leader Alfred Richer, flight logs, photographs, scientific reports. They show a straightforward whaling survey expedition. Economic objectives, territorial claims. Nothing about archaeological discoveries. Nothing about ancient technology. Nothing about underground civilizations. Nothing remotely resembling the Vril mythology. The logistics make the conspiracy impossible anyway. The expedition carried aerial photography equipment, biological sampling gear, and oceanographic instruments. No mining equipment, no excavation tools, no machinery for recovering artifacts from beneath kilometers of ice. The crew consisted of naval officers, aviators, photographers, and scientists focused on whaling surveys. No archaeologists, no excavation experts, no specialists in ancient technology, because they weren't looking for ancient technology. Germany did experiment with unconventional aircraft during World War II, the Horten flying wing, various circular wing concepts. But these experimental aircraft were developed at German research facilities in Europe. They're thoroughly documented in captured German records, and none of them worked particularly well. None were developed in Antarctica. None were based on ancient alien technology. None saw combat service. The entire Vril Antarctica narrative is a post-war construction. It primarily appears in books from the 1960s onward that blend together unrelated elements. Real German Antarctic expeditions, real German aircraft experiments, a fictional energy source from a Victorian novel, and occult beliefs of fringe groups. No contemporary German documents from the 1930s or 1940s mention discovering ancient technology in Antarctica. 0. The theory exists only in modern conspiracy literature, not in any historical records from the period. But what about the ongoing U.S. military presence in Antarctica? Operation Deep Freeze has been running since 1955, nearly 70 years. What are they really doing down there? 8. Operation Deep Freeze, 1955, present. The United States launches Operation Deep Freeze. It's supposed to be temporary, supporting scientific research during the International Geophysical Year of 1957-58. That was 70 years ago. The operation never stopped. Conspiracy theorists point to this as obvious proof of something sinister. Why would the military maintain continuous presence in Antarctica for 7 decades? Why are certain areas designated as no-fly zones? What are they hiding at McMurdo Station? Alleged whistleblowers describe massive industrial complexes, hidden landing strips for exotic aircraft, underground facilities that dwarf anything publicly acknowledged, secret activities that have continued uninterrupted since the 1940s. And here's what makes it suspicious. It is a military operation. Not NASA, not civilian scientists. The US Navy and Air Force, running logistics, controlling access, maintaining facilities. But what if I told you the real reason for Deep Freeze is both more mundane and more impressive than any conspiracy? When the United States committed to participate in the International Geophysical Year, they faced a practical problem. How do you maintain year-round research stations in the most hostile environment on Earth? Antarctica kills. It kills quickly and efficiently. Temperatures drop to -89 degrees Celsius. Storms appear without warning. Crevasses swallow equipment and people. Medical emergencies hundreds of miles from help. Supply chains that need to work perfectly because mistakes mean death. Civilian organizations didn't have the capabilities, but the military did. Heavy transport aircraft, ice-breaking ships, construction battalions, medical evacuation capacity, logistics expertise, search and rescue capabilities. Operation Deep Freeze's mission has remained consistent for 70 years. Transport researchers and supplies to Antarctic stations, maintain year-round bases, conduct search and rescue when needed, provide the infrastructure that lets scientists focus on research rather than survival. As for those suspicious no-fly zones, they exist for entirely practical reasons. Areas around active research where aircraft noise would ruin sensitive experiments like seismological monitoring. Safety zones near runways and helicopter operations. Environmentally protected areas where aircraft disturbance could harm wildlife populations. Regions where magnetic anomalies make navigation dangerous. These restrictions are managed by the Antarctic Treaty System. They apply to all nations, not just the United States. They're publicly documented, scientifically justified. The continuous military presence through Operation Deep Freeze has enabled extraordinary scientific achievements. Discovery of the ozone hole. Ice core analysis that revolutionized climate change understanding. Discovery of Lake Vostok and other subglacial lakes. The Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. Fundamental contributions to our knowledge of Earth's climate history. Those supposed whistleblowers describing secret industrial facilities? They've never provided verifiable evidence, never given specific locations, never produced documentation. Meanwhile, thousands of scientists, support personnel, and military members have worked in Antarctica over 7 decades. International researchers from dozens of countries, all rotating through regularly. The idea that massive secret installations could exist without being discovered by this large, international rotating population is absurd. Operation Deep Freeze is exactly what it claims to be. A military logistics operation supporting legitimate scientific research in extreme conditions. It's remarkable not because it hides conspiracies, but because it represents sustained human achievement in one of Earth's harshest environments. But what about those Russian reports of mysterious attacks during their Antarctic expeditions? That's where things get truly strange. 9. Soviet Antarctic Expedition, 1958. The Soviet Union establishes research stations in Antarctica. Within months, reports start leaking back to Moscow. Strange encounters, equipment failures that don't make sense, phenomena that nobody can explain. Conspiracy theories claim Soviet documents describe luminous orbs or plasma entities that attacked equipment and personnel. Advanced defensive systems protecting secret territories. Technology so advanced it couldn't be human. Some versions claim these encounters were kept secret during the Cold War, but have since leaked through Russian sources. The Soviets were tough. They'd survived Stalingrad. They'd endured the Great Patriotic War. They weren't easily frightened. So if they reported something that scared them in Antarctica, it must have been serious, right? Here's what actually happened, and it's both simpler and more impressive than any conspiracy. The Soviet Antarctic program faced challenges that would break most humans. They established Mirny Station on the coast, then Vostok Station in the interior. Vostok is one of the most extreme locations on Earth. In July 1983, Vostok Station recorded the lowest naturally occurring temperature ever measured on Earth, minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. That's minus 128.6 Fahrenheit. Cold enough that exposed skin freezes in seconds. Cold enough that breathing hurts. Cold enough that equipment fails in ways engineers never anticipated. Imagine working in those conditions. Extreme cold causes equipment failures that seem inexplicable. Intense storms create zero visibility. Crevasses hide under snow, ready to swallow vehicles. Electromagnetic interference from natural atmospheric phenomena disrupts communications and instruments. Isolation tests human sanity. The luminous orbs conspiracy theorists cite. They appear nowhere in official Soviet scientific publications from the period. Soviet Antarctic research focused on glaciology, meteorology, astronomy, and geophysics. Their published papers describe natural phenomena, not mysterious attacks. But Antarctica does create unusual optical effects that can seem otherworldly. Ball lightning, rare electrical phenomena that appear as luminous spheres. St. Elmo's fire, electrical corona discharge that makes equipment and aircraft glow. Atmospheric plasma phenomena associated with strong magnetic storms. These natural occurrences weren't well understood in the 1950s. To observers experiencing them for the first time, in extreme isolation, in the dark Antarctic winter, they could seem threatening, even hostile. If Soviet expeditions had genuinely encountered defensive systems or unexplained attacks, they would have reported it to international bodies under the Antarctic Treaty, which came into effect in 1961. The Soviets weren't shy about making formal complaints when they felt threatened. No such reports exist. The leaked Russian documents cited by conspiracy theorists have never been authenticated, never traced to actual Soviet archives. They often contain obvious fabrications and errors that anyone familiar with Soviet bureaucracy would immediately recognize. Meanwhile, the real achievements of Soviet Antarctic research are impressive. Discovery of Lake Vostok, one of the largest subglacial lakes on Earth. Ice core drilling revealing climate records going back hundreds of thousands of years. Crucial data for understanding Antarctica's geology and climate. Vital contributions to International Geophysical Year research. The Soviet Antarctic program faced real challenges and achieved real scientific triumphs. Natural phenomena in extreme conditions can seem mysterious, even threatening. But inventing fictional attacks by mysterious entities only obscures the genuine story of human perseverance and scientific achievement. But what about those satellite images showing rectangular openings in Antarctic mountains? Surely those prove something is hidden down there. 10. The modern satellite. Entrances. Google Earth changed everything. Suddenly, anyone with an internet connection could explore Antarctica from their computer. And people started noticing things. Rectangular shapes. Too geometric to be natural. Too symmetrical to be coincidence. Massive openings in mountains. Perfect right angles in ice formations. Structures that look artificial. Conspiracy theorists call these the hangar doors. Evidence that the bases established in 1945 remain active. Proof that secret operations beneath the ice have never stopped. And honestly, when you first see some of these satellite images, they do look strange. Some features appear to be rectangular openings hundreds of meters across. Others look like perfectly straight lines cutting through ice fields. Some seem to show regular patterns that natural processes shouldn't create. There's just one problem with using satellite imagery as evidence. Actually, there are several problems. And understanding them requires knowing how satellite imagery actually works. Satellite images aren't photographs in the traditional sense. They're data compilations. Multiple images stitched together, compressed for transmission and storage, processed through algorithms. And every step of that process can create artifacts. When satellite images are stitched together, they create seams. These seams often appear as straight lines. Compression artifacts in JPEG images create rectangular patterns, especially in areas of uniform color like ice and snow. Shadow angles create illusions of depth at certain times of day. Resolution limitations cause small, irregular features to appear more geometric than they actually are. But Antarctica also creates genuinely geometric natural formations that look artificial. Tabular icebergs break from ice shelves with perfectly straight edges and right angles because ice shelves fracture along stress lines. Exposed rock formations show columnar jointing from cooling magma, creating regular geometric patterns. Glaciers carve valleys with remarkably straight walls and flat floors. Crevasse fields create grid-like patterns of parallel linear features. Scientists have thoroughly examined many features claimed to be artificial. Ground-penetrating radar surveys show natural rock and ice formations beneath the surface, not hollow chambers. Geological surveys explain formation processes. High-resolution imagery from newer satellites reveals that many rectangular features are low-resolution artifacts that disappear with better imagery. But here's the more fundamental problem with hidden bases in Antarctica. Any facility requires constant supply, fuel for generators and heating, food for personnel, spare parts for equipment, rotation of personnel. These supply operations would be visible to satellites, ships, aircraft. Antarctica has no indigenous population for cover. Any significant installation would be immediately obvious. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 allows any signatory nation to inspect any facility in Antarctica at any time. This provision has been regularly exercised. Inspectors from multiple countries visit each other's bases, unannounced. Thousands of scientists from dozens of nations work across Antarctica every year. They travel extensively. They conduct research in remote areas. They use advanced sensing equipment. Commercial satellite companies sell high-resolution Antarctic imagery. Military satellites from multiple countries monitor the continent. If massive hangar doors or secret bases existed, they would have been confirmed by multiple independent sources. Instead, every investigation of supposed anomalies reveals the same pattern: natural geological features, or image artifacts. What appears artificial in low-resolution imagery consistently proves natural when examined properly. Antarctica's real mysteries are more fascinating than fabricated conspiracies. Hidden subglacial lakes, ancient mountain ranges buried under kilometers of ice, extreme geological processes we're only beginning to understand, life forms surviving in conditions we thought impossible. The modern satellite entrances theory demonstrates a fundamental problem with conspiracy thinking: seeing patterns in ambiguous data without understanding the technical context. Pareidolia applied to satellite imagery. Antarctica has genuine secrets, but they're scientific secrets, waiting to be discovered through research, not military secrets hiding in pixels. Notice the pattern across all 10 of these Forbidden Antarctic Missions. They all follow the same formula. Take a real historical event. Add ambiguity from missing documents or classified operations. Incorporate dramatic narratives about Nazis, superweapons, or UFOs. Rely on technical ignorance about fuel capacity, construction logistics, satellite imagery, or basic geography. What gets lost in these conspiracy narratives is something genuinely remarkable. The true history of Antarctic exploration is more impressive than any fiction. Real explorers faced extraordinary challenges with primitive equipment and astounding courage. Real scientists unlocked crucial secrets about Earth's climate, geology, and atmosphere. Real military personnel supported research efforts in brutally harsh conditions. Real international cooperation turned a potential Cold War battleground into a continent devoted to peace and science. The truth about Antarctica is more impressive than any conspiracy. It's a continent where humans learn to survive and conduct science in Earth's most extreme environment, where international cooperation flourished even during the Cold War, where discoveries about climate change, ozone depletion, and Earth's history transformed our understanding of our planet. Base 211 never existed. Operation Highjump never fought Nazi UFOs. The submarines never went to Antarctica. The satellites don't show hidden bases. But what actually happened, what humans actually achieved in Antarctica, is far more worthy of your attention than fabricated mysteries. Antarctica's genuine story is one of human achievement, scientific discovery, and international collaboration. That story deserves to be told accurately, because the truth is always more impressive than the conspiracy.